Okay, this particular story is called The Story of Muhammed Din, and it's from 1888, and it's by Rudyard Kipling. It's on page 306 of your textbook. But what I'd like you to do is simply follow along and listen to me. If you need to, you can turn to that page in your book and you can follow along with the text, but I'd like you to try to just listen to me the first time and see how well you understand. All right, here we go. The Story of Muhammed Din. The polo ball was an old one, scarred, chipped, and dinted. It stood on the mantelpiece among the pipe stems which Imam Din Kitmagar was cleaning for me. "Does the heaven-born want this ball?" said Imam Din deferentially. The heaven-born set no particular store by it, but of what use was a polo ball to a Kitmagar? "By your honour's favour, I have a little son. He has seen this ball and desires it to play with. I do not want it for myself." No one would for an instant accuse portly old Imam Din of wanting to play with polo balls. He carried out the battered thing into the veranda, and there followed a hurricane of joyful squeaks, a patter of small feet, and the thud, thud, thud of the ball rolling along the ground. Evidently the little son had been waiting outside the door to secure his treasure. But how had he managed to see that polo ball? The next day, coming back from office half an hour earlier than usual, I was aware of a small figure in the dining room, a tiny, plump figure in a ridiculously inadequate shirt which came, perhaps, halfway down the tubby stomach. It wandered around the room, thumb in mouth, crooning to itself as it took stock of the pictures. Undoubtedly, this was the little son. He had no business in my room, of course, but was so deeply absorbed in his discoveries that he never noticed me in the doorway. I stepped into the room and startled him nearly into a fit. He sat down on the ground with a gasp. His eyes opened and his mouth followed suit. I knew what was coming and fled, followed by a long, dry howl which reached the servants' quarters far more quickly than any command of mine had ever done. In 10 seconds Imam Din was in the living room. Then despairing sobs arose, and I returned to find Imam Din admonishing the small sinner who was using most of his shirt as a handkerchief. "This boy," said Imam Din judicially, "is a budmash, a big budmash. He will, without doubt, go to the jail khana for his behavior." Renewed yells from the penitent, and an elaborate apology to myself from Imam Din. "Tell the baby," I said, "that the Sahib is not angry, and take him away." Imam Din conveyed my forgiveness to the offender, who had now gathered all his shirt around his neck, stringwise, and the yells subsided into a sob. The two set off for the door. "His name," said Imam Din, as though the name were part of the crime, "is Muhammed Din, and he is a budmash." Freed from present danger, Muhammed Din turned round in his father's arms and said gravely, "It is true that my name is Muhammed Din, Tahib, but I am not a budmash. I am a man." From that day dated my acquaintance with Muhammed Din. Never again did he come into my dining room, but on the neutral ground of the garden we greeted each other with much state, though our conversation was confined to "Talam Tahib" from his side, and "Salam Muhammed Din" from mine. Daily on my return from office the little white shirt and the little fat body used to rise from the shade of the creeper-covered trellis where they had been hid, and daily I checked my horse there, that my salutation might not be slurred or given unseemly. Muhammed Din never had any companions. He used to trot around the compound, in and out of the castor oil bushes, on mysterious errands of his own. One day I stumbled upon some of his handiwork far down the grounds. He had half buried the polo ball in dust, and stuck 6 shriveled old marigold flowers in a circle around it. Outside that circle again was a rude square, traced out in bits of red brick alternating with fragments of broken china, the whole bounded by a little bank of dust. The waterman from the well curb put in a plea for the small architect, saying that it was only the play of a baby and did not much disfigure my garden. Heaven knows that I had no intention of touching the child's work then or later. But that evening a stroll through the garden brought me unawares full on it, so that I trampled, before I knew, the marigold heads, dust bank, and fragments of broken soap dish into confusion past all hope of mending. Next morning I came upon Muhammed Din crying softly to himself over the ruin I had wrought. Someone had cruelly told him that the Sahib was very angry with him for spoiling the garden, and had scattered his rubbish, using bad language the while. Muhammed Din labored for an hour at effacing every trace of the dust bank and pottery fragments, and it was with a tearful and apologetic face that he said, "Talam Tahib," when I came home from my office. A hasty inquiry resulted in Imam Din informing Muhammed Din that, by my singular favor, he was permitted to disport himself as he pleased. Whereat the child took heart and fell to tracing the ground plan of edifice which was to eclipse the marigold polo ball creation. For some months the chubby little eccentricity revolved in his humbling orbit among the castor oil bushes and in the dust, always fashioning magnificent palaces from stale flowers thrown away by the bearer, smooth water-worn pebbles, bits of broken glass, and feathers pulled, I fancy, from my fowls, always alone and always crooning to himself. A gaily spotted seashell was dropped one day close to the last of his little buildings, and I looked that Muhammed Din should build something more than ordinarily splendid on the strength of it. Nor was I disappointed. He meditated for the better part of an hour, and his crooning rose to a jubilant song. Then he began tracing in the dust. It would certainly be a wondrous palace, this one, for it was 2 yards long and a yard broad in ground plan. But the palace was never completed. The next day there was no Muhammed Din at the head of the carriage drive, and no Talim Tahib to welcome my return. I had grown accustomed to the greeting, and its omission troubled me. Next day Imam Din told me that the child was suffering slightly from fever and needed quinine. He got the medicine and an English doctor. "They have no stamina, these brats," said the doctor, as he left Imam Din's quarters. A week later, though, I would have given much to have avoided it. I met on the road to the Mussulman burying ground Imam Din, accompanied by one other friend, carrying in his arms, wrapped in a white cloth, all that was left of little Muhammed Din.